The subject of today's video has one of the craziest stories from the 2023 NFL Draft. Midway through high school, he didn't even know what a goalpost was, and he was stuck working at a local fast food joint in order to help his family survive. He went from not knowing how to play football to now being a first-round draft pick in just 7 years. He rewrote the Iowa State record books, will go down as one of the best pass rushers in Big 12 history, and now will be the future of the New York Jets. In today's video, I want to introduce you to who Will McDonald is. We're to go through his insane story to getting to this point, his record-breaking career at Iowa State, and why he is going to save the New York Jets. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, let me know what player, topic, team, or situation I can cover next, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Will McDonald. Let's start today's video out with a quote. When Will McDonald first walked onto a football field in 2016, he didn't know what the goalposts were. He said, quote, "I literally didn't know anything about football. I couldn't tell you a tackle from a guard or anything." 7 years later, McDonald is now a first-round draft pick, and going back in time, the McDonald family started out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and when he was a younger kid, it was not easy. In 2008, his mother was diagnosed with cancer, and thankfully she was cancer-free by 2012, but that had to be unbelievably difficult for him growing up. Will was always an insane athlete, but he poured all of his time into basketball and helping out his family. He eventually moved to a town known as Waukesha, I hope I said that right, and when he was a sophomore, basketball was his only sport. If that didn't work out, his plan was to go over to the Army and make his way to success there. One day, he was walking through the hallway when Waukesha North High School football coach Matt Harris was also walking the halls. This was in 2015, and this was the first time he ever saw Will. McDonald had just transferred in and caught the attention of the football coach, who was taken aback by the ginormous shadow in the hallway. Harris saw potential in the big build he had and thought he could translate well into the football field. So, he ended up sprinting down the hallway and chased down McDonald to figure out who the new kid was. He wasn't playing on his football team, and he said, quote, "He was like, I've got to work, I can't play." Will barely had time for basketball, and he also had to help out his family. When he wasn't at school or playing ball, he was helping either babysit or he worked at the local McDonald's. The money he made didn't stay in his pocket or go towards anything he wanted, but instead went straight to his family, who was living in an apartment and seemingly was paycheck to paycheck. The coach had to beg his mother to let him play, but she was worried that her son would get hurt. Ultimately, that wasn't the biggest worry, as they ultimately needed Will so he could help pay the bills. His mom said, quote, "He helped pay the bills in this house and keep the lights on." Eventually, the family took the risk and allowed Will to play football, and Harris convinced McDonald to come out and play. He ended up only practicing about 10 times before he'd play against some of the lower level teams, and Harris had to teach him literally everything. He was so new to the sport that he didn't know what the goalposts were or how to get into a three-point stance. They told him to focus on just getting after the quarterback, and when the defensive staff would signal a play, they'd have one person sending one in just for McDonald to make things easier. Harris had to get him on the field because he was so insane. He said, quote, "Right away, I was like, holy cow, he's the most incredible athlete I've ever seen." McDonald's first game action would come late in his sophomore year, and against Waukesha West, he had 7 sacks. That was only at halftime. He believed that McDonald was just scratching the surface of his potential, and his coach thought he could make him into a Division I player. His mom was worried though, as she said it was a hard decision because she was worried Will wouldn't get enough rest. After him going to work, getting off 8 o'clock, coming in, trying to do homework, and back to school at 7 a.m., it was a challenge. Eventually, it would pay off as he had a breakout season. During his junior campaign, he racked up 69 tackles, 20.5 tackles for loss, and 11.5 sacks. It led to college programs being interested, which included Wisconsin, and they met after just 2 games during his junior year. They ended up going out to lunch, and he would eat alongside Ron Dane and Barry Alvarez. McDonald didn't know who they were. That was crazy, but his recruitment would start to blow up, and one school in particular took extreme notice. It was Iowa State. They started recruiting McDonald right away, and as they learned more about his story, Cyclones head coach Matt Campbell was impressed. He was impressed at how much adversity he'd overcome, and went to watch his basketball practice one time to make sure he was the real deal. He said, quote, "I met with him for an hour in the volleyball office after his basketball game. When I heard him talk, I knew this kid had a chance to be special, and while he had elite traits, he was very raw." When it came time to make a decision, he eventually chose the Cyclones over Baylor and Minnesota. Football was his last sport, and he didn't forget his first sport either. In basketball, he averaged 18 points and 13 rebounds a game as a senior, won the state discus championship with a toss of 179 feet, and also finished 3rd in the high jump. The guy was an absolute insane athlete, but his best and most impressive feat was on the football field, as a senior, he had 61 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 12 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. He committed his junior year and was actually the Cyclones' first commit, so his stock stayed pretty stagnant. According to 24/7 Sports, McDonald was the 3-star recruit, the number 47 weak side defensive end, and the 787th best player in the class of 2018. So, how would he do in Ames? When McDonald arrived at Iowa State, he would decide to redshirt in 2018. In 2019, he began as a linebacker before he would switch back to defensive end mid-year. How would he end up doing in 2019? Well, he had a breakout performance. He ended up finishing with 15 tackles, 6 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Because of that, he was a freshman All-American, and him and Breece Hall were seen as the next great stars at Iowa State. 2020 would only make that more of a reality. He'd end up finishing with 33 total tackles, 1 pass deflection, 10.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. McDonald was now one of the best pass rushers in college football, but he'd have one more breakout season in store. In 2021, Iowa State had a ridiculous amount of hype. While they ended up busting on the hype pretty early on, he ended up finishing with 36 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 5 forced fumbles, and 11.5 sacks. He was now one of the best defensive ends at forcing fumbles in college football history, and he was chasing the Big 12 and Iowa State sack record. While he probably would have been a second-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, he decided to come back. He had a reason for it. He said, quote, "I didn't want to go back home empty-handed and be the only one who went to college that didn't do anything with it. I think that year really shaped me, especially after my brother passed away, and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't for nothing, and I wanted to have him see me do it." Unfortunately for Will, his 2022 season was not great, as it seemed opposing offenses figured out how to stop him. He only finished with 5 sacks and 1 forced fumble. He still holds the record for sacks in Big 12 history and had an insane career. He finished with 125 tackles, 40.5 TFLs, 34 sacks, and rewrote the Iowa State history books. McDonald had a terrific 4 years as a starter for the Cyclones, and many believed he could be a day 2 pick. Matt Campbell said, quote, "Will has physically and football-wise gotten better leaps and bounds every season he's played. The one thing that he has from an elite trait that the NFL is looking for is the ability to affect the quarterback. I feel he's the most elite player I've ever been around in that respect." Because of that, Will, as I said, was seen as a day 2 pick, but some at the end of the day were thinking he could go in the late first round. To the shock of all of us, he ended up getting drafted by the Jets with the 15th overall pick. Immediately, some people looked at this pick with scrutiny, but when you look at the tape and look at his body of work, it makes sense. McDonald was really happy as well. He said, quote, "It's an honor. I wasn't expecting myself to be here 6-7 years from now, and just being able to show my family and friends that there is a way to do things and that there is a way to reach your goals." Sadly though, one family member was not there to watch, as his brother passed away in 2021 while he was at Iowa State. Since then, McDonald has honored him by wearing a chain with his brother's picture in it, so he said he got to watch spiritually. With him being drafted by the Jets, he'll be reunited with a couple of other Iowa State players, including his former teammate Breece Hall and former Iowa State legend Allen Lazard. The Jets now have their next great ferocious pass rusher, and if he can translate his Iowa State game to the NFL, then he could have a long career in the league, get in the opposing team's backfield for years to come, and may only be scratching the surface. Remember, he's only played football for 7 years now, while many other guys who he'll be playing against have played their whole lives. Will may have one of the highest ceilings of any player in the NFL right now, and I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. Going from working at McDonald's and not knowing what a goalpost is to becoming a first-round pick is pretty impressive, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, let me know your thoughts on Will down below, and give me another player I can cover next. Before you go, don't forget to also subscribe and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about Julius Brents. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.